name is Samuel Capozzi. I am delighted to be with you all today. I am autistic, and I consider myself both minimally speaking and non-speaking. I do have speech, but it is minimal and at times unreliable. I use AAC to communicate, namely a laminated letterboard, wireless keyboard, and iPad. These AAC tools and the support of two outstanding communication partners allowed me to access higher education and graduate university with the highest honors. I also managed to get into law school, but that is deferred for now. It has been nearly 10 years since I've had a reliable means of communication. And as you can see, my whole world opened up and became brighter as I was able to really connect with people in the world around me. As you take this journey as potential communication partners, I believe you will discover that connection is key. Connection is vital for all of us to learn, grow, and flourish. I was homeschooled for most of my life because having an age-appropriate education in my school district at the time was simply non-existent. And although I didn't have my communication breakthrough until age 16, my parents tried to provide interesting, enriching, educational and social opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. Thankful for my hardcore parents. They literally never stopped looking for ways to improve my life, not change me, but open my world as widely as possible. Yes. They aimed to live in understanding with me, which meant so much because I was so very misunderstood, as are most non-speaking autistic students. Offering understanding and developing it, like taking this course, is key to your growth and success as a potential communication partner and autism ally. You're on your way. I am grateful for my personal growth and understanding of my apraxia, which impacts my motor skills including speech. It was so confusing as a young child and even as a teen. I could not understand why my body wouldn't respond to my mind. I knew what to say, how to perform, how things worked, yet my body didn't cooperate, including my speech. Can you imagine how maddening this is? How depressing it is? I also understand the confusion this causes to those who love and support us. It requires compassion and patience to educate and support someone who experiences apraxia along with autism. Providing compassionate boundaries and profound patience, with respect for your student's age, is key to developing trust as an educator or communication partner. As we learn about the lived experiences of actually autistic individuals, non-speaking autistic individuals, in particular, we must listen, we must hear, and we must change how we educate, intervene, and offer support. Listening to the experiences and voices of those we're trying to help is foundational. This is the ethical thing to do, right? I say we because even though I am autistic and non-speaking, my lived experience isn't exactly the same as my peers. That is, even I have much to learn. Here's the thing, how can we listen, learn, understand, and offer support if we can't hear or read the words and thoughts of so many people who don't have a reliable means of communication using their speech? Communication is a human right, I think once pondered. We can all agree on this, even though I don't think many people take the time to ponder this fact. Have you? A reliable means of communication is crucial to every human being. Can you imagine not having a voice or say in your own life, including your education? Imagine a generation of non-speaking autistics and others with communication disabilities educated and supported by professionals who decide to toss coercion-based interventions like ABA, shaming, low expectations, and task-related acceptance out the window, and instead replace those tactics with connection, understanding, patience and compassionate boundaries, and a real means to communicate. Oh, and how can we forget presuming competence? educating and supporting autistics and others with communication disabilities in a world like this gives me great hope. Godspeed as you not only join the shift, but also create the shifts. Excelsior.
Hello, my name is Judy Heumann, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me to speak with you for a few minutes. So, I guess the first time that I met someone who didn't have speech like myself was when I was about 9 years old, and I finally started going to school, and this was in the late 1950s, and I was in classes just for disabled children. I was in the middle of the fourth grade. And there were quite a number of children who had cerebral palsy, most of whom had some type of a speech disability. And most of the children I could understand once I knew them pretty well. And there were some children for whom augmentative communication would have been great. But at that point, there really was not an emphasis on AAC, and to the best of my knowledge, not even boards with words and letters, certainly not in the school that I was in. But as I got older and I began to meet more people who had speech disabilities, I also began to meet people who were using different forms of technology. Everything from my friend Hale, who has a board and wears a helmet with a wand and pecks out the words and has words on his spelling board, to another person I knew in Mexico who used her foot to be able to do the same thing as my friend Hale did. And then I began to meet people who were using different forms of technology that varied for children versus adults. So one of my dear friends, Bob Williams, who I've known for a couple decades now, for those of you who know him, he uses an augmentative device that is a machine, and he communicates through the machine pretty typically. And so I really learned to value the importance of people being able to communicate and be respected for the way they are communicating. I think it's certainly fair to say that all too frequently, people who are not speaking with what I guess you could call traditional speech are not listened to, are not paid attention to in the same way. And that's really something that I've been involved with for many decades now, both by learning from my friends, but then when I worked at the Federal Department of Education and had responsibility over the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That's where I really began to see that school districts, in many cases, were either denying children the technology they needed for the ability to communicate effectively, or if they were receiving it, were frequently not allowing the children to take that technology home, which never made any sense to me unless you really recognize that they didn't intrinsically understand that the communication devices they were using were enabling children, young adults, to communicate and gain agency over their lives. And so one of the areas that I focused on when I was Assistant Secretary in the Department of Education in the Clinton administration was getting policy written and implemented that requires school districts to allow children and young adults to take their technology home. For those of you who are working with people who are AAC users or are working with families who are have children who are younger and may benefit from using AAC technology, it's really important that you understand how the various forms of technology which are out there really create opportunities for people to be part of the general community, and to be able to really learn and be able to authoritatively talk about what's important for them. And there are too many people now who are not getting appropriately assessed for AAC, and that needs to change so that people can be getting technology when they need it. And I think it's so very important, as I've been saying, that we really need to ensure that people are given opportunities to explore the various forms of technology that may work with an individual. And we need to allow people to recognize that this form of communication is equally valuable and that people have rights. The right to communicate and to express oneself is very important. I think what I've also learned over the years is that you get more patience when working with people or being friends with people who are communicating differently because it may be slower, it may require better listening skills, but at the end, there's such a reward in being able to take the time to listen and to thoughtfully engage in a dialogue. I think if you haven't seen the film Crip Camp, I encourage you to watch it because there is a really powerful scene in Crip Camp where a woman named Nancy is part of a roundtable discussion. And she was a friend of mine from elementary school and never got any form of communication device. And people really liked and respected Nancy, and so people took the time to listen to what she had to say. I think Crip Camp is a perfect example of learning to be respectful and inclusive of people who interact in different ways, but in the end really contribute to our communities overall.
My life has been full of situations when I have said no and the person has not listened, whether it was my mom, my sister, a teacher, or a friend. I am too often ignored because I cannot communicate traditionally. I instead have to rely on someone to stop and ask permission before I can say no.